And progressively, more and more perspectives are coming to the table to help fashion a better, more sustainable and affordable solution. So you hear about scientists and ecologists getting out and really looking at more sophisticated understanding of what's going on. You have planners getting involved with how this fits into the community dynamics. You have Wall Street and finance capital getting involved with thinking about how to develop new business models. You have landscape architects getting involved with green roofs and trees and whatever. And I'm so happy that Jeff Chapin has come, because I think the last or next to last, whatever, we'll see. And then nevertheless, actually citizens, they're the most important ones to the table, because citizens are really complaining that this is not a sustainable way we've been doing it, and ultimately they have the power to change things. But from a professional standpoint, I think we need to look at the design world, and especially, and what they have to contribute to this work and these solutions, and especially in Falmouth. You all know that you can talk on and on about the technology solutions and financing, but if your resident homeowners will not accept such things as composting toilets, that's a final hurdle that could be a barrier to much of what has been discussed. So the design world has a lot to say, we'll hear, about how you can come to understand and work with your homeowners to develop an approach that sits well and accomplishes what they hope to achieve. So I think we all are really going to learn from your presentation about a very different way, a non-engineering way to deal with this issue.
And I guess I'll start just with the notion of design. So Valerie mentioned design. I think probably most of you picture something like this, a fancy object that you might spend a lot of money on and design within reach, or some other store. And designers do and have traditionally developed and built beautiful things. The company I work for, what I do, we call design thinking, which does involve some of the aesthetic, but it's more about a system, and more about user needs. A bit about me, I have worked actually in toilets. Maybe like 7 years ago, I worked in, I lived in Munich, and I worked for Villeroy & Boch, which it would be like an American standard or something in the US. We designed an odorless toilet. So you couldn't smell anything when you defecated. Very expensive, like maybe a 700 euro toilet. This is the project, this is an installed latrine from Cambodia, so on the very other end. This just dumps the waste into a pit in the ground, something you might have at like a National Park Service. My company, we call ourselves, it's IDEO is the company's name. We're a human-centered design consultancy. So we start every project by going and talking to the stakeholders, so whoever the users are. In this case, it's going to be your homeowners, it's going to be your businesses, your plumbers, it's going to be regulators. Like, there's a huge network of stakeholders here, and we go and talk to them all. A little bit more, so my background is in engineering and design. My company is really broad, so we have people who are brand designers, architects, urban planners. So in order to design kind of a system, you don't just need engineers or product designers, industrial designers. You need people from all segments and all professions. And clearly, we engage with experts. In a project like this, there are clearly composting latrine experts and stormwater management experts. We're not that expert, but we engage with people who have expertise needed. We're pretty big in the design world. You can see our locations. Started in the Bay Area. We've been in Boston for about 20 years. I personally live in Providence, so I'm actually a little bit closer to you guys. We work with most companies you would have heard of. So a lot of Fortune 500 companies, not just product companies, a lot of service companies. We started here, so we developed the very first laptop. One of our founders has a patent on a screen folding over a keyboard, and he's subsequently very wealthy. And we developed the first mouse for Apple. So we started in Silicon Valley in the 80s, and this is where we came from. We now do all kinds of stuff. Every consulting company has a diagram. I never thought about ours in terms of sustainability, but maybe you could. We talk about innovation. So we say we start with the people, and then we feed in the business. Is there a viable business there to support the innovation, and can you actually do it? So I think you can see the parallels. And something sustainable or something that's actually innovative is in the middle. You can actually have a sustained service or a sustained product that meets everybody's needs. I'm going to take you through this process where we start with inspiration. It's going out, talking to people, we come up with ideas. We do prototyping and implementing, and then kind of go all the way back. So I'll explain it generically, and then I'll apply it to the latrine project in Cambodia. So inspiration. This is a project we did to develop a new emergency room experience for a healthcare system in the Midwest. And one of our researchers, rather than go and ask, just have interviews or do a focus group or do a survey, one of our researchers held this handheld camera next to his head and checked himself into the emergency room and went through the whole process holding the camera next to his head. And not once did anybody ask him why he was holding it. So what we learned from this is one, as designers, we learn empathy, and we actually get to experience what the user of that hospital experiences. And then we can very easily convey that back to the administrators or the management. We can also learn and design from it. And there's very obvious things if you've ever gone to the emergency room. Typically, you spend a lot of time, he ended up on a gurney stretcher, so he ended up staring at ceiling tiles for about 2 hours. There were about a dozen different people who came and asked him pretty much the same question. And didn't really identify himself, and always asked who the previous person who he had talked to. And he didn't remember who he talked to because there's too much chaos. And so it leads to some really low-hanging fruit insights that you can capitalize on to redesign that experience. Another thing I wanted to talk about on inspiration is we have this notion of extreme users, and I think in this project in Falmouth, it's worth thinking about who are our extreme users. So this diagram in the front, you can imagine that this maybe is your main target audience. And for a consumer product, say, we do a lot of work with Procter & Gamble, and say like a new mop. Your target audience is going to be an American housewife, probably age 35 to 45. Then you have extreme users. If you're talking about floor cleaning, your extreme user might be a janitor in a school cafeteria, or somebody who has to flip and clean airplanes in 5 minutes before the airplane has to turn around at the gate. So we always want to find out who are the extreme users, because although we don't design for them, we can learn a lot from them. So who would be the extreme users here? It might be people that already have a composting latrine, or people who are dead set against it, who would either never come to a meeting like this, who would come and be combative the whole time. So we need to understand the mentality and the behaviors of our extreme users in this case. In a similar vein, in the background picture, there's this notion of positive deviance, is where you can learn from people who are doing things very well. So it's a group out of Tufts, and what they found, this was a study they did in Vietnam, is there were certain families whose children were thriving, and they were equally poor as all the other families, and nobody understood why. So they went and studied them and found that the mothers of those children that were thriving were gathering small snails and slugs while they were doing rice farming and feeding them to the children. And that tiny bit of protein made a huge difference in weight gain and mental aptitude and other things like that. So again, you're learning from a positive deviant, somebody who's doing something well, to spread that to everybody else. Ideation, we do a lot of co-creation and co-design. So this was from Cambodia. We have people from the Ministry of Rural Development, people from other NGOs, folks from the private sector, doing really tiny, like 1/8 scale latrine builds with us to try to get a lot of co-creation and include their ideas in the process. So the question is, how do we co-create with the community of Falmouth? And then implementation. So I really like this idea of the staged build out. It's a bit further along, but a very similar way of thinking, where we do a lot of prototyping. So The example here on the screen is from the early handspring PDA. We were designing the user interface of that. And rather than fully code out and develop a UI, we did it with Post-it notes. And in about an hour, you can do an iteration of what a user experience design. So what is the navigation through that device? So in the case of this, how do we prototype what consumers might want, how businesses might provide services and products to our citizens of Falmouth? Okay, so I'll get into the latrine case study here, and I'll go through these different steps that I've talked about. So the problem, it's more extreme than our problem here. 82% of rural people in Cambodia open defecate, so they just defecate in their farm fields or behind each other's houses. So we were just trying to get people to have latrines. We're funded on a Gates Foundation grant to research how to build a sanitation market. So rather than give out latrines, which is financially not possible to get enough coverage, you need billions and billions of dollars, can we create businesses that can provide the product and the services that are appealing enough to get households to spend their own money to buy the latrine and install the latrine and service the latrine. This is what we ended up with. It's such a basic latrine that normally when I give this talk to a development audience, they understand exactly what it is. They call in the language is a offset pour flush. So it's a squat pan toilet. So they don't sit like we do. They squat, and they would have a bucket of water next to them. And after they defecated, they would take a scoop of water and pour it in. It has a normal trap like our toilets do, and then the water comes through a pipe into concrete rings that are just buried in the ground. This is a yard that is now selling the latrine. But this thing has existed forever. I mean, the concept is not new in the world of development of latrines. Where we created something new was in the system to make, sell, market, and install the latrine. So everything around it, the system around it. And you can see this is a different latrine component being made in a different business. I'll connect this back to Falmouth a little more closely, in case you're wondering. So inspiration, I said we go talk to the field. So what would inspiration be here? It would be going to households. So I know that maybe this wasn't intended to be a forum where a lot of the public came, but if it was, how much of the public would have been here today? I don't know. We heard twice that it's kind of hard to get the public to show up on a weekday. You can go to their house, and it's another option, or go to their place of work or whatever it is. You can go meet them where they are rather than have them come here. And that's the approach that we advocate. I mentioned stakeholders. Who are stakeholders? You can see here who we had. There's the villagers, there's retail stores that are selling latrine components, there are people that make concrete, which is here, and then there's masons. It's a simpler ecosystem, I think, than we have here.